Welcome back to Financial Independence 101. This is Mike. Today I want to talk to you about the government shutdown and the stopgap measure, which is a deal they agreed to make it through to December. But I've got a big problem with these government shutdowns. First off, they're not talking about it very much. There's very little information about what's going on. This is allegedly a bare bones deal to barely get through to December. But what does this really mean? What it really means is that we're going to see another bout of inflation. They're creating more money out of thin air. They're approving to spend money that they don't have, or we don't have. The government is broke. They don't have two dimes to rub together. They've got to create it out of thin air or take it out of your pockets in order to continue going on. And I really am irritated about the rhetoric that surrounds this, the way it goes these days. Although this is an old chart, and technically this is the chart of 2010, our debt is double this, literally double this. And will it double it again by 2030? I mean, it probably will, but we're going to talk about this and more, the effects of what's going to happen, because we're going to be having this conversation again in a few months about another shutdown at the beginning of the year. Let's get into talking about this coming up. First of all, I want to say that it is absolutely impossible for the Speaker of the House to please either side. I mean, it's an impossible job. You're not going to be able to please, Mike Johnson's not going to be able to please every Republican, and definitely not going to be able to please Democrats. It is an impossible job. But I kind of feel like he sticks to his guns for some of these, and the reason they outed McCarthy is because McCarthy was making deals. And the overall consensus is we want to vote on one policy. We want one policy. We don't want to cram in 15 to 25 unrelated, unnecessary spending attachments to every single bill. We want to keep the government open and move on, not add a bunch of unnecessary spending, which is what they did here, is my understanding. So I guess we're almost a week old on this, but congressional leaders announced an agreement Sunday on a short-term spending bill that will fund federal agencies for about 3 months, and it's averting to a possible partial government shutdown. So we averted the shutdown, and the new budget begins October 1st, pushing the final decisions until after November election. So there's a lot of reasons why they're doing this. First of all, they obviously want to keep the government open, which I would love to see a shutdown and just stop spending money, spend less money, and then we can see exactly what the necessary government agencies are. You'll be surprised how little government is really needed, but it's way too overblown and bloated and a waste of money. But temporary spending bills generally fund agencies at current levels, but an additional $231 million was included to bolster the Secret Service after the 2 assassination attempts against Republican president nominee Donald Trump, and additional money was added to aid with presidential transition, among other things. Aid in the transition, that's kind of strange. Lawmakers have struggled to get to this point at the current budget year winds down and to a close at month's end. The problem with all of this is the fact that we are broker than broke, and nobody on either side is talking about cutting spending. You look at all this, no one's talking about cutting spending. The problem isn't that they're saying, basically from their standpoint, the problem isn't that we spend too much. The problem is we just don't have enough money. That's not the problem. The problem is the spending. Key takeaways from this segment is that it's funded into mid-December, which means I guess they'll be arguing about it in December again. And then it's only bare bones, only the extensions that are absolutely necessary. While this is not the solution that anyone would prefer, it is the most prudent path forward under present circumstances. And we keep finding ourselves here because the government, again, is broke, and because there's no austerity measures, and because nobody's talking about cutting spending, because nobody wants to cut spending. The reality is we need to cut spending. We need to, some people, a lot of people, and I would probably suffer too, we will all have to work a little harder and dig a little deeper. But destroying the dollar, that's not a good idea. So there's just some negative talk in here. The government funding effectively on autopilot, which is not true. And then they're saying that Speaker Johnson wanted to follow the MAGA way and wasted precious time. First off, it's not precious time. The time is not precious. We should be able to fund ourselves indefinitely and meet our budget, but there really is no budget. There's just willy-nilly overspending and nobody really paying attention. I pulled this, I should go check, because I pulled this a few days ago. So we've cracked that 35 trillion, but this is the interesting thing here. This was 4 days ago, and it's actually less than 4 days ago, 11.5 billion. Let's see about this real quick. Yeah, that's close to $3 billion a day that was added to it. And what I think is going to happen is once this bill passes, we'll see a huge insurgence on here. It's just going to bump up even higher. But they're saying that we're going up $1 trillion pretty much every 100 days, which is interesting. I'm going to watch that a little bit closer. But this shows that where are we going with this? With these government shutdowns, and they're approving bigger spending, and probably eventually we're going to hear another $1 trillion bill or $1.2 trillion bill that's going to get approved, and a bunch of wasteful spending that's going to be in it, and then it causes inflation. So the problem is these government shutdowns do cause inflation, because instead of austerity measures, instead of we're going to cut spending here, we're going to cut spending there, we're going to spend less money, we're going to shrink the government. Instead of doing that, they spend money even more, and the government's broke. So that means that you're going to be paying for it through inflation and through taxes. I want to show this chart because I've never seen a chart that showed it quite like this, that crunches it down from 1940 to 2010. I can't seem to get from 1940. Well, I want to get even further, but anyhow, it's actually double. But look how it's just shooting up exponentially. That's to 2010. But we've doubled it since then. So it's even twice as high in the next 14 years. But the rate we're doing nothing to slow down this debt, the national debt. And that is a major, major problem. And again, this is why they're lowering interest rates, because the debt is so high that they can't pay the 1.1 to 1.7 trillion as the years go by and the money rolls over and the treasuries roll over. Then it's going to be up to 1.7 trillion just in interest on that debt. But this is a big problem. I mean, this is a huge problem. This debt and inflation are the biggest problems that we suffer economically. The next thing I want to get into is the way we look at government shutdown. So this is from 2013. I got more stories about the Bushes I want to talk about, but because of the federal government shutdown, all national parks are closed. And what you used to hear is the government shutdown, it would process your passport slower, and government shutdowns, we would have parks closed, and just a lot of these things that are really not necessary, but they're nice to have. And part of our history, we want to go see these things. We want to go to all of these government-funded parks and things to do. And I went to Washington, D.C., and I went to all of those interesting attractions they have up there, and the Washington Monument, and the Lincoln Monument, all those kinds of things. But with that, those would all be closed. And then other services would slow down. And the IRS, well, they would still collect on you, but they wouldn't pay out your return if they were shut down during a shutdown. But nowadays, we hear a different rhetoric. Nowadays, we hear, and it's mostly coming from the left side, the Democrats, saying that we're not going to be able to pay our military. But even though the military is considered essential, our soldiers are considered essential. They should be getting paid. I don't like the fact that I hear that rhetoric. The rhetoric we should hear is, oh no, Congress didn't do their job and cut spending and institute austerity measures, so they shouldn't get paid. And when they figure it all out, they shouldn't get back. So they should have a gap in their pay until they figure it out. They shouldn't get paid since they didn't do their job. You know, the difference is now we see that Congress doesn't serve the people. They make the people serve them. This is not acceptable in America, in the USA. So why do we hear this rhetoric? Because, well, they're basically admitting that they view themselves as a ruling class and we are all peasants at their mercy. And I don't like that. I really don't like the rhetoric. I don't ever want to hear again that soldiers aren't going to get paid even though they're classified as essential. And essential still gets funded during a government shutdown, and yet they go to this as their first go-to. Now, you didn't hear much of this on the news because I don't even think this government shutdown got a total of 3 minutes of airtime across all news stations. I've done some research into government shutdowns, and I really just kind of remember George W. Bush talking about, it stands out in my mind when he did some sort of an address to the nation. It was extreme wasteful spending is all I heard him say. Like, we're spending money on this, spending money on that. I was like, what a waste. I'm over here working hard and y'all are trying to suck me dry in taxes, but you're wastefully spending money. I disagree with it. But that's what I remember. But one thing I want to point out is, as terrible of as a president he was a terrible president. I just really do not like hardly any of his policies. I'm really not really happy with saying he's a Republican. He didn't have a government shutdown on his watch. But maybe that's saying that he caved to the other side every time. Or he influenced his constituents to cave to the other side. But I was doing some research because for whatever reason I thought he had a shutdown. His father did, George Bush Sr., and Clinton did, and Reagan had like 6. But I couldn't find any under him. But I could have sworn we had one, but I guess not. Well, I got a list of videos that I plan to make. I really should start making daily content because there's so much to talk about that gets just skimmed over by the news. The news is not there to inform you at all. It's there for mind control. It's to make you think. You want to tune in for your 6 o'clock news to learn what you're supposed to think and how you're supposed to think, not inform you of what's really going on. So that's what I'm going to do here. Anyway, let me know what you think about this whole shutdown averted. Yet again, we'll be talking about it again in December, again, and then I'm sure they will not do the right thing in December either. So let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, Financial Independence out.